Welcome back to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. My name is Juri Love. I'm your host. Thank you very much for coming in. Today we are recording episode 134. Before I introduce my guest, I want to introduce my book, which is the same title as this podcast. It's called A Gift from Adversity by Juri Love, Jurilove. Please check it out on Amazon. A Gift from Adversity, the subtitle is Overcoming Sexual Abuse, Domestic Violence, Bullying, and Homelessness. I published this book in 2020, and after I published my book, I got a lot of messages from different places that people are sharing their stories, and I decided to start this podcast that people can share their stories, but not only that, tools that they use to overcome the challenges, and then a gift that came from it. So let's invite our guest. But before I invite my guest, I want to shout out to my friend Shay and Jen, who gave me this beautiful hat from Auburn Green in Providence, Rhode Island, where I got to model and then be a shopper and staff today. So shout out to them. So let's invite our guest, Nichola. Thank you so much for coming in, Nichola. Hi.
Hi, thank you.
So, can you please tell our audience your name, where you're coming in from today, and what you do, and then if you have any social media website that you want to promote?
Sure, it would be my pleasure. So my name is Nichola Zacher, and I'm coming from St. Thomas, Ontario, Canada. And I'm an author. I've wrote 6 books about my puppy Marley. I'm in the process of writing another one. And my website is marleysdream.com, and Marley has a Facebook page, Marley's Dream Love.
What is the book about?
The book is about Marley sharing love with all the friends that she meets and the adventures she has. Marley is a puppy filled with sparkle and love and kindness. So she shares a message of love.
And she is your dog?
Yes, she is. She's right here. Here's Marley.
Hi, Marty. How are you?
Say hi. Say hi, Marley.
So for the
Shiner.
audience who's just listening the podcast, not visually, can you explain how Marty looks? What kind of dog?
She's a Shorkie, part Shih Tzu, part Yorkie, and she's 5 years old. I bought Marley from the breeder when she was 2 months old. And the moment I held Marley for the first time, I knew that she was going to bring so much love into my life. I just felt that in my heart.
How old is Marty?
Marley is 5 years old.
And then the book is about Marty.
Yes, it is.
What inspires
Marley's
you?
Dream Love is my first book.
What inspires to write a book?
Marley won a Facebook contest. She was an illustrator's first inspiration for a book. And it was against a lot of American dogs. And so we had the news come to the house because Marley won this competition. And they interviewed us. And then they weren't ready to write the book. The illustrator was having some issues that she needed to deal with. And so there was another publisher in the group. And she said, I'll publish a book for you. And I said, I've never wrote a book. And she said, oh, you just share your stories about Marley. So that's what I did.
Yeah, when Marty comes back on, maybe you can show her.
Yes.
Oh, him.
Yes.
Is it a boy or girl?
She's a girl.
Oh,
She has her red on today for Women's Day, sharing all her love with all the special women in her life. Right, Marley? Look at the camera. There's Marley.
Oh, she has a ponytail.
Yes, she does.
Cute.
Yes.
Hi.
Say hi, Marley. Wave your paw.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, well, the listeners on Spotify podcast,
Yeah.
Mari is very cute.
Thank you.
Hi, you're welcome. So, um, yeah, one of my friend online says sassy.
Uh, oh, okay. Oh,
Sassy,
wow. That's cool.
cute. All
Yeah.
right. So I got distracted by Mari, but let's dive into um, our first question, which is the adversity. So, Nicola, thank you for coming in again. And can you tell our audience what was your adversity?
Well, when I was born, there was no soft spot in my skull. So they had to do an operation. They had to put a shunt in my skull. So the operation was done when I was about 3 weeks old. And it was done in London, Ontario, Canada. And that's the city that I live in beside right now. I live in St. Thomas, and London is right beside it. But I was born in Kitchener Waterloo, which is about an hour. So my parents had to drive to the hospital, and my dad was speeding. And the police stopped him and said, "Why are you speeding?" And he said, "Well, we have to get our baby to the hospital." And he said, "Okay, I will give you a police escort." So they gave them a police escort to the hospital, and the surgery was very successful. It was the first time they'd ever did that kind of surgery. But the doctors painted a very dim picture. And they said I would be a vegetable and never go to school. And my dad was very firm and said, "No, you're wrong. She will be all right. I will make sure she's all right." And my parents did. They provided an excellent education. When I went to school in kindergarten, the teacher would always put my desk out in the hall. And my mom went for a few times, and then she noticed that I was always in the hall. So she asked the teacher why my desk was in the hall, and she says, "Well, I can't teach her." So then I went to a private school in Toronto, and I was tested, and I had trouble with math. So the government paid for me to go to the private school in Toronto, and it was on Park Avenue, and it was big houses all around it, very fancy school. And my parents just had to make sure that I was able to get to school. So we lived an hour from Toronto. So we used to have to get up at 5 and take a train and a subway and a bus to get to school. And I did that for a year, and I learned math. So, and my parents, provided that education. And I was able to go to college and get my early childhood certificate and teach in daycares. So I feel very blessed.
Well, Nicola, thank you so much for sharing that. Let's go back to your childhood. I know you don't maybe remember much about, um, when you're a baby and stuff. What is your earliest memory of you having this condition, and then maybe were you get were you did you get like bullied, or were you teased, or do you remember any of these things?
I do remember going to summer camp, and I was it was an overnight camp. I remember a boy coming in the middle of the night with a baseball bat and hitting me with the baseball bat. So I remember being bullied like that, and that was the end of going to overnight camp. But and what were other times? I do remember the boy down the street. He would always put his bike right in front. I used to walk to school, and he would put his bike right in front of my path and say, "You're not going to school, and you can't get past us." And back in those days, I think parents used to deal with it like just between themselves. The school wasn't involved or anything. In those times, parents just talked more and settled it. And so my mom did go down and talk to his mother, and that was the end of it. And but my parents were very, very protective of me, very hands-on, and sheltered me very much. yeah, I had. I was very blessed with lots of opportunities. My parents had a cottage. They bought a cottage when I was like 3 or 4 years old. So I spend the summers there every summer, and so I had a very wonderful childhood.
So you got bullied because of your operation, or maybe something was different, or just randomly targeted?
Well, I think those boys were bullies. I don't know how much it had to do with me. I think it had more to do with them. Like, I think I wasn't the only one they bullied. I think they bullied quite a few children, and just very tough and like to bully,
And how
because I
about
was very social. Yeah, like I did make friends very easily.
your medical appointments and stuff? Did you have to go to a lot of hospital visits after
I
your
did
operation?
I did go and get tested because the doctors said that I would be a vegetable and never go to school or never do anything. And I was provided with an excellent education and went to private schools and went to private school in Toronto. So I was very fortunate. But I did go and get tested, and the doctor was very nice. I was very fortunate to meet such a nice man. And he said that I was very, very gracious. He told my mom, she's a very, very gracious young lady, and she will do well. He said, like, she could be a sales clerk because she's so gracious with people. So the doctor, at that time was very positive for that medical appointment.
So when you were growing up, when did you learn about this big operation when you were a baby? What age? Do you remember what age you learned it? Did you learn about this when you became an adult, or did you learn about it when you were little?
Well, I knew from going to private schools that I had trouble with math because that's what they focused on helping me with. And but I was always, like, my parents always treated me like I could do whatever I wanted to do, and that I would always be provided for opportunities to learn and whatever I needed. So I always felt secure and loved, and I think that's important.
And do you have any siblings?
Yes, I do.
Did they
They're 10 and 13 years older than me, so I was the baby, definitely the baby.
did they have the
And
same problem when they are born, or you are the only one?
I was the only one. No, they're very bright, successful, and I've been very successful in you know being a teacher and being now an author.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing your adversity. Did your parents say any struggle, like, of, you know, the big surgery that you had? I know, like, the police part of it, like, you were speeding. Why wasn't there ambulance or something? It was like way too far away or something.
What was it?
So you told me that when your father got pulled over because speeding, the police
Right.
escorted him to the hospital. So they didn't have like an emergency, like, vehicle, like ambulance and stuff. They just decided to take you.
Yeah, I was in the car, so he was driving fast to make sure that, because I had to be there in time for the operation.
Oh,
Yes, that's why he was going fast. No, they weren't arguing. It was just that he was driving fast to try and get to the hospital in time for my operation.
okay.
Yes.
And then you were how old were you? Like couple
A few
months?
weeks old.
A few weeks old.
Yes.
Wow. So when you were born, you weren't in ICU and sorry, NICU. You weren't in newborn ICU.
I imagine I was. Yeah, I was. No, well, I mean, I was at home. They brought me home. So,
Wow.
Yes. So I did come home with them because they drove me to the hospital the day of the operation.
Yeah, it's interesting
Yes. Yes.
because I feel like in America, if you are born with the skull issue, I don't think they will discharge the baby.
Right. Well, I know I had to be taken care of very well so that I didn't get sick. So it was, it was a big responsibility for my parents. And they did very well because I've always been very healthy.
After the operation, everything went okay, and there's no complication in terms of the health.
No, no, I've had no health issues. Very, very healthy. I'm very fortunate.
Wow.
Yes.
So you don't really recall any like trauma or fear of hospital
No,
or like,
no, it was always, no, my childhood was always very positive, and all my teachers always loved me, and I had lots of friends. And when I was in school, I went to school, and there was a Mennonite girl in, I think she was grade 3, and 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 I went to the one boy I was in school with. His uncle was Daryl Sittler, the hockey player. So that was that was very cool to be going to school with someone whose uncle was a hockey player. And yeah, I had lots of close friends that I played with that lived around in my neighborhood, and friends at the cottage. And there was always lots of love and support for me. And I think that's very important when I talk to parents. And I'm able to share my experience and understanding how parents feel, and you know the dedication and commitment it takes.
it's very interesting to hear when doctors say you're gonna be vegetable, you're not gonna learn.
Right.
It's very interesting to know that your parents were against doctor's opinion. And then this is one thing I kind of noticed: the doctors are really privileged human beings, and then obviously they worked really, really hard to get to where they are. But
Right.
sometimes I had a bad experience with doctors, and then I feel like power abuse and then power trip. And then sometimes the belief system, especially in the Western medicine, that label you that you're not gonna basically survive and you're not
Right.
gonna walk or
Right.
learn.
Right.
A lot of sorry, a lot of people believe in that. Why do you think your parents were against or didn't like take that?
I think just love. I remember my dad. I said to him, Dad, you don't have to be so protective. I'm okay. And he said, No, don't ever say that to me again. I made a promise when you were born that I would protect you, and I always will. So I think it was just, he was just right from when I was born. He, just felt in his heart that he was going to protect me, and he always did. I'm just very loved by my parents.
That is a very strong will because again, especially when doctor tells you, "Hey, your child's not gonna survive."
Right.
A lot of people would say, "Okay," you know,
Yes.
they just
Yeah.
kind of give up. But it's very interesting that you are like your parents just didn't take that as
Right.
an answer and then kind of went against almost like ignore them and then kind of believed in what they saw in you and it
Yes.
kind of kept pushing and going. And I was wondering if there's any stigma around the doctor between the doctor and then your parents because doctor wants you to listen. And
Yes.
so for instance, the thyroid issue, I had thyroid issues and I had a Japanese doctor tells me, oh, you gonna have a scar on your neck, nobody want to marry you, you never
Oh my goodness.
not gonna have a husband because you're gonna have a scar, and then you
Oh my
might get
goodness.
radiation. And they were like really mean. Even like in operation, I had to be partially anesthesia and awake, and they were like so mean.
Yes. Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, and then I had a doctor who was like power abusing, but also like I had a doctor who told me I have to be on medication for the rest of my life. And I said, no. And then she said, well, you're choosing to not be well. But I actually changed my diet, and then I was okay. Like my number
Yes.
went down. So
Right.
I feel like sometimes one way of thinking in a Western way could be completely different way in the
Right.
Eastern way. Or here up in the brain, like will like
Right.
say, okay, you just told me my daughter is gonna be vegetable
Right.
and never gonna learn.
Right.
I'm not gonna let that happen.
Right. Yes.
That is just really crazy. Strong will.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
interesting that like no later on when you said don't worry and then like, oh no, don't ever say that. He must be very, very strong person.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'm very grateful because yes, a lot of people, a lot of parents would not be able to accept that or deal with that. So I've always been very thankful.
Looking back at those challenges, do you have like anything that you can recall that was hard for you growing up or not really?
No, I mean, learning math was challenging, but my parents found the opportunities for me. My mom found the right school, and my dad would work on percentages with me at night. And even today, if I see somebody in the mall and they're having trouble with the percentage and trying to figure out what to pay, and I'm able to help them, and I'm just very grateful that they did work with me. And no, when I think about my childhood, there's lots of happiness. I was very blessed. And it was, I mean, that was a big commitment to get on the train and the subway and the bus, but it was also an adventure and an opportunity, to be able to go to a fancy school and wear a uniform and everything and all these fancy lots of interesting children from all different families. And yes, and we used to go to Vancouver and visit my sister. And so I traveled a lot. And we used to go to Florida in the wintertime because my aunt had moved to Florida when I was just a baby. So we went down there at Christmas and when I was just little. So I think I learned a lot from all the traveling to and the experiences that I had being around different people.
Enlighten me about the public school system. Why did they fail you? Like why did they put you outside of the classroom in the kindergarten? And why couldn't you stay in public school? Like what's going on in Canada?
Well, I think now they've improved a lot. I know from doing author visits at the schools, they have improved a lot and they have a lot of the special needs children right in the classroom. But, you know, back 50 years ago, that's not the way they were. And I think the teachers weren't trained for that was part of the problem.
But private school was.
Yes, they had more specialized teachers.
That's so interesting.
Yes. Yes, it is.
But now you think Canada is more even public school. If the kid like that came today, 2024, in the
Right.
public school in Canada, do you think they would accommodate and they have
Yes.
like
Yes.
right staff that
Yes.
the child doesn't have to take bus and train and go to completely different like school?
Right. Yes. Yes, they do. They definitely do accommodate all students more. It's more inclusive.
Do you know any? law that was implemented. They say America has 1990 American Disability Act was formed. Do you think?
Yes.
Do you know anything about Canada? Like maybe what shifted for the school to be demanded to have this capacity and then be more inclusive?
I think over the years, yes, it was just demanded, and laws in the education system were implemented to be able to help all children, and all children were included. I know that from teaching in the daycare. Even in the daycares, they all children were accepted at the daycare.
You cannot discriminate these challenges.
Yes. Yes, and I was able to help children that had challenges more because I could relate to them, that they just needed love and kindness, and that would help them a lot.
It is very difficult to um, either side. So if the educator or staff are not trained enough to be inclusive,
Right,
they can be the bully. Like my heart absolutely breaks for you that you had to put on hallway. Like when you're in the kindergarten, where
right,
it is the beginning of the introduction of your education, where
right,
it should be celebrated and welcomed.
right.
And like I think kindergarten is super important for
Yes, it is.
the child to be introduced to the school system, and then for you to be outside of the classroom. I think it's just so brutal.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was brutal for my parents too to, see me out in the hallway. But I never internalized that because when I went home, I was so loved and not treated any differently. I was treated that I could do anything I wanted to do. And my parents would make sure that happened.
Well, Nicola, thank you so much for coming to a gift university and then letting us know about the challenge that you had to face when you're born, and then the big surgery that you had, and then some of the stigma that they had in Canada back then. um I'm glad to hear that it has improved, and I'm glad to hear that your your parents helped you a lot.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. So, can you tell our audience what are the tools that you use to overcome these challenges? And then before you start sharing, I just want to tell our audience that this is one of my favorite part of the podcast, because a lot of times that people go through extreme trauma, that try to share it with people who may never had that trauma.
Yes.
They just say, "Oh, go see a therapist," and like sometimes therapists can traumatize you
Right.
too. Yeah. So, and then it's not the only thing that you can use to overcome these challenges. So,
Right.
Nicole, with your big brain surgery, when you're a baby, a couple weeks after you're born, and then
Yeah.
how it affected you, what are the tools that worked for you or is working for you to navigate or had navigated this challenge?
I think having a loving and supportive upbringing really helps, and you give your child the confidence that they need, by providing opportunities and assuring them and helping them find their strengths and their passions and building on that. I was always good with children. I could always find a way, to help a baby stop crying. when nobody else could get the baby to stop crying in the daycare, I could just pick up the baby and talk to them, and the baby stopped crying instantly, and I've just always had a passion for and love for children. And, my parents encouraged that, and I took care of my nephews, and, I was babysitting, and then, they provided the opportunity for me to go to college to get my early childhood. So I think if you help your child find their passion and support them in that, and, just help them to believe in themselves, that they will succeed.
And how about yourself? I know your parents did a lot to help you navigate this, but how about yourself? How did you help yourself?
I always believed that I could, and I would always find a way. Whatever I needed to do, I would do that to make sure that I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and achieve my goals. So you have to have that determination, I think, too, to become successful. And I was very determined.
What was your determination?
I was determined that I was going to make a difference in children's lives. And it's interesting how it went from working with children and then becoming an author and writing children's books and sharing my books with children. So I just kept building on my success.
And your parents must be very proud of you.
Yes, yes, very much so. Yes, they are. Yes. Yeah, all the books are dedicated to my dad, and for, because I'm sharing that same love with children that he shared with me when I was a very tiny, brand new baby.
I know you told me that, he made a promise to protect you.
Right.
What else did he say about your condition that helped you?
He he just would always say to me, "You remember you're number one. You think, you put yourself first." And, because I think a lot of times people, he knows in the world that people can be, aggressive or try and take advantage if they think, that you're naive or whatever, if they feel you're too soft. So he said, you need to protect yourself. You need to put, you're number one. You need to put yourself first. And that was very important to him. So, yeah, so me being all right and taking care of myself, and that meant everything to him. So he's very happy.
He sounds like a wonderful person.
Thank you. Yes, very much so.
Well, Nicola, my final question for you is a gift that came from the adversity. So, can you tell our audience what's the gift that came from your adversity?
That I'm able to share the love with children, and I share that love with my puppy, Marley. All the love that my parents and family shared with me, I'm able to share that same love with children. So it's a great way to honor them, and that's always made me happy. I've always, since I was a little girl, I loved being kind and gracious. So I'm still able to do that.
Well, thank you so much, Nicola, for coming to A Gift from Adversity tonight. Before you go, would you please give some advice for people, especially parents also? Rosemary suffering with their kids' medical condition, um, or yourself too. But if there's somebody out there listening to this episode who
Yes.
now is going through some hard disease or conditions or surgery, what would be your advice to those people who's going through these challenges?
To believe, I know I've talked to parents and they've said it's so hard when you receive that diagnosis from the doctor that your child is not going to be all right. And, they question God. Why is this happening to me? And I said, and I sympathize with them. And I say, I know it's very hard, but your child has so many wonderful qualities. And I just show that child so much love and find all the positive qualities and lovable qualities they have. And I share that with the parent. And I just try to be very positive and very encouraging and loving and supportive. And I think that's what parents need. They need you to see all the great qualities in their child because it's there. That love is there. They're just scared. So they just need support.
It is tremendous advice, but in the reality, that will be probably the hardest thing to do
Oh,
when
it's very hard. And it's not supporting that parent for 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week. That support has to be always. And they need to know that you're there for them and you see the greatness in their child. That's a big part of it. If you can see the greatness in their child and share that with them, then that makes them proud. Because every parent loves their child. It's just sometimes it's faced with more challenges than others. But if you share that love, that makes them proud.
yes. And I think nowadays, especially when you get this like diagnosis from medical professionals, it's just so hard
Yes,
to
yes, definitely.
even bias your own child's potential. So really kudos to your parents
Yes,
for and yourself for
yes,
overcoming this challenge.
yes. Thank you.
Well, Nicola, it was very moving, touching story, especially listening to your parents and the father, especially his love, dedication, and not giving up on you and seeing the potential. However, the doctor told very differently.
Yes,
I'm sure they were very devastated, but I just really admire your parents, and I'm very happy that you are able to now give back to those parents who just, you know, I can't I can't even find a word. It's almost like hearing the savior and then the most important word that they need to hear to survive from you.
right,
And that came from your parents. So
right,
we kind of intergenerationally healing souls and combating this one opinion about a human being.
right.
But there should be many, and there should be beliefs, and there should be miracles, and then
Yes,
there should be different ways, and there
right.
should be some ways to heal. And I believe if there's a will, there's a way.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes.
Any final word before you go?
To just always find love and unconditional love in your child.
Well, thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you to our audience for listening to another episode of A Gift from Adversity. We have more episodes coming up. So see you next time.
Thank you.